welcome to episode 29 of Agents of Aquarius. My name's Jim Pine. Listen, I haven't done it in a lot of times here. That's not even proper English, but I didn't. And what we need from you is, if you watch our videos, please, I beg you to like them. If you don't do that, could you subscribe? But if you did like them, could you like and subscribe? And either or also just share these with anybody that you think likes this kind of stuff. Any of your friends, that 1 in 10 person in your life. There's not many of us, we know, but we're looking for more agents. We're recruiting. So please share this to your friends. Tell them about this. We need more listeners. We need to get this, or it feels like we need to get this message out. So I ask you, myself, Jim Pine, along with my co-host, Maddie D, we ask you to please at least share this with your friends. And then if you can you can subscribe. YouTube, Spotify, iTunes, and your mom's house. Hey, we'll do it. So here we are today. We have a lot of interesting things I think we're going to talk about. We're going to stick to some subjects, but the subjects are so diverse. Like every part of this whole podcast could go in a million directions. Each one could be its own podcast, which someday maybe it will be. But today we're going to just jump, we're going to jump across the planet. We're going to go to a place called Antarctica, and we're going to explore there first. That's where we're starting. And we're going to run the gamut today. That's all I can say. So what's up, my boy, Matt?
Oh, this is going to be a fun one today, my brother. Just because it's such a cool topic, it's really far out. And often we'll try and kind of stay based in reality. This one's based in reality, but it's just pretty far out. This whole Antarctica business is super weird, and it's going to be a lot of fun to get into it. So start us off, brother. What do you want to talk about Antarctica?
Well, just like you learn about it in like elementary school, right? There's like the bottom part of the globe, because every classroom had a globe, and they also had like a world map in our classrooms when we were going to school. Like the Rockefellers had bought us all globes and bought us maps, and we had them. And then you'd see the bottom. There was this white part. Up top was the North Pole. The bottom they called South Pole, but it was also known as Antarctica. Craziest name ever, Antarctica. It's like not Arctica, but it's really Arctica, or at least that's what they're telling us. So on that globe, there's this big continent at the bottom, and all we're told is it's like, it's this icy place of like Thoth or Hoth or whatever it was from Star Wars. It's like this place nobody can go, but most of the countries have a treaty. There was an Antarctic treaty created where everyone said, we will not create military bases here. We will just use it for research and study. And that's what I know about Antarctica until more recent times of when I've had an enlightening of like looking for new ideas and trying to understand things in new ways. You start to go down the rabbit hole. And one of the first people you run into when you're doing this is these tapes from Admiral Byrd, who was a Navy admiral, and he went down there right after World War II with a fleet, because he'd already done the North Pole. Admiral Byrd did a whole North Pole. I think he did like 2 or 3 runs up there with like the Navy, but then he took a damn fleet with an aircraft carrier, several destroyers, there's cargo ships, they brought the whole fleet down there by the Navy, paid for by the Navy, to go check out Antarctica after World War II.
Yeah, like a research expedition.
Yeah.
With 5,000 soldiers.
And they left. They went down there. Something happened to them. There's a lot of like tapes that you'll see where there's about like flights, and he spoke of like they got past ice, and then there was like inhabitable lands down there, and they saw pyramids, and they saw all kinds of different structures, but also lost one of their ships. I believe a destroyer was destroyed. Most of their aircraft were destroyed. Okay. They tell us
research expedition.
Many men died. Like I think hundreds. I'm not the exact sure. They don't give you an exact number. And this is a research expedition to the South Pole.
Supposed
So
to
this,
last what, 4 months, and they came back after two, or it was supposed to last 6 months, they came back in
I
two?
think it was six. It was supposed to be a 6 months, since 6 month expedition. They would have resupply ships coming, and all of that was going to be happening. But
Yeah.
they would be down there with this freaking naval fleet, dude. We're not talking like they just went down there on a sailing ship, like it was a naval expedition, a military expedition. And they went down and got their dick kicked in and came home early, way early.
He stopped off in Argentina first, and Byrd gave an interview where he had some things to say. But yeah, man, I'm with you. They it looks like they went down there in force, got their asses kicked, and went home with their tail between their legs. And it just begs the question, Agent Pine, who kicked their ass?
Well, we don't know. We don't have any actual proof. But what we do know is there's not supposed to be any military down there. Be but but against those the treaties signed, there was already a group of people that seemed to have showed up there.
Well, I think the treaty was in the 50s.
Yes, that was after them. But there's a group had already was there that weren't going along with the treaty. There was a group of
Yeah.
people, it seems to have showed up to New Schwabenland, which was called Queen Mall before
Queen
that.
Maud Land.
Queen Maud Land, which I think was owned by Norway or
One of those Nordic countries,
Netherlands.
Denmark, Norway, something like
I
that.
think it was Netherlands or Norway. It was an N one when we both each Maddie and me both just listened and watched this thing called Antarctic Disclosure by Robert Sepper, Sepehr, on YouTube. Watch it. It's about an hour long. It's incredible. What we learn is a lot of things where we know that the Nazis went down there like during World War II. And it seemed like they took a lot of their resources where they could have been pouring these resources into the war and would have been able to dominate, where they made some like weird moves during the war, which people still to this day are like, whoa, what they shouldn't have, why would they do that? It's because it was just like all to let it fall out so they could just like leave and go away.
Yeah, everyone, including the Germans, by 1944 knew Germany was going to lose the war. And there seems to have been a big push by a guy named Martin Bormann, who was the number two in the Nazi party at that time, right under Hitler. They were dumping all their money into secret bank accounts and secret businesses, and they were establishing, basically, among other things, a business empire worldwide. But they're also establishing the rat lines to get the main players out of Germany. But it seems like at the same time, these suckers were building a base down in New Schwabenland, as they called it, this new, or Queen Maud Land. And
Which was changed to New Schwabenland.
they changed the name to New Schwabenland, which I believe it still is if you look at a map.
Yes, it is.
But it looks like not only did they really go deep into countries like Argentina after the war, but it looks like during the war, they were building up a sizable colony in Antarctica. And that's what this business of Admiral Byrd was all about. He was going down there to mop up these Nazi leftovers. And and it looks like they got their asses handed to them, because these same Nazis were the guys who were doing all kinds of advanced technology experiments. And they had what they called the Nazi Bell, which is basically a flying saucer. They had, basically, according to the myth of some of the myths of World War II, is that these suckers had made anti-gravity ships that could fly around with way more speed and capabilities than anything else that was even close to them. And that's why they got their asses kicked so hard.
Yes.
Why
Yes.
the
Well, he
fleet did.
spoke Admiral Byrd's quotes where they could fly from pole to pole in a blink of an eye. Pole to pole meaning not like north to south, but like they could go from one side of your vision to the other in a blink of an eye. They're gone. Like they had a force and an energy that was like otherworldly. I want to back up 1 second because we just said a place a couple times, and I just think it's kind of fun. Let's throw it in there right now. This Queen Maud Land or Queen became New Schwabenland.
Yeah.
Well, there's a word in there, Schwab. Listen, one of the founders of this whole thing and creator of the idea was Klaus Schwab's father.
A prominent
New
Nazi.
Schwabenland, a prominent Nazi. That yes, the son being Klaus Schwab, creator of the World Economic Forum, created in 1971 or 1972, just at the time of our births, into this world where the world made these huge changes right around the birth. We both had a birth right around that time, where, and actually between mine and your birthday, they get rid of the gold backing of our dollar.
Yeah, huge
That's
impact
done.
on the
Yeah, and at the same time, Klaus Schwab starts the World Economic Forum, which becomes this like new world leader in and how society should function, which they now want it to become one world government. Eat cricket powder, and you'll like it. You'll own nothing. Also, he said. So New Schwabenland, this is the place the Nazis get. It's Klaus Schwab's dad is like one of the creators of this place, thinking this idea. And in part of what you're finding out is like the Nazis had so many, that German army had such amazing technology. And we don't know because they didn't show it to us outright with during the war with the flying ships, but their submarines were said to be 2 times larger than our biggest floating vessels, which is wild because submarines aren't really, we didn't create the technology, at least we didn't have it back then, to create these giant submarines. And the Germans were smart enough to be like, why don't we just create giant ships that are underwater nobody can see? These things were enormous, and they had 100 of them that disappear at the end of the war, not blown up, not anything, just disappear at the end of the war. It goes into like talking about how they created an underground base in Antarctica that could only be reached basically by submarines. Like subs could go in and then pull up and pop up in giant caverns that were under the ice.
yeah,
This
volcanic from like
vents,
what do
like
you what do you
vents,
call that?
volcanic air was coming up. These hot air would come up and like hollow out caverns, but it would still be like,
Under the ice sheet, yeah.
yeah, it would still be under the ice sheet, but it would be a giant carved out caverns with complete life and all. And then they went and started building bases, and they were like, wow, this is a great place to put a base.
Yeah, and apparently a lot of geothermal energy to get them started so that they could have an energy source, have heat, have these hollowed out spaces. But, let's keep in mind too, again, the Germans were diversifying all around the world at the end of the Second World War. And there's really good researchers who have done really extensive deep dives into how these guys, like Germany lost the war, the Nazis seem to have done all right. And like there's this fellow named Jim Mars has a book called Rise of the Fourth Reich, I believe it's called. He's the guy that wrote the book that Oliver Stone based the JFK movie on. So you could tell he's like kind of a heavy hitter when he goes to tackle something. But people like him lay out really good evidence trails of how the German money and the money that was looted from Europe was spread all around the world, started all kinds of companies, and they were using a lot of technologies that they had been developing through the war to get to be leaders in scientific and ventures. Like these companies were really cutting edge, I guess is what I'd say. But it's also really well documented that these guys left Europe. They went to countries like Argentina, and then of course we know there was like your Project Paperclip, where they're brought into this country, into the United States.
Russia, the United States, they were divided up, their greatest minds were divided up amongst some different countries, mostly the United States and Russia. What they took were their greatest scientists, their greatest psychiatrists, psychologists, engineers, anything that they could grab. All these two countries were grabbing and then using this horrible, Third Reich's technology, basically, that they'd somehow gotten, which is another whole subject in itself. How did they get this ancient technology? That's because apparently, I tried to remember it. I didn't write it down. That word that that unit they kept talking about in that video, the Annickberg, or there was a group. It was the group of like Russians, or I'm sorry, of German. This is like their psych unit, like their psychology crazy.
I don't
They had like
remember.
the psychic unit.
Well,
Oh my
these are the people
gosh.
who worked with the Tool Society people.
Yes, the Vril, the Tool, but they had this like unit that was like, I don't even know. It's like men at stare at goats, but like beyond. And this is in the 30s and 40s.
Yeah, they had pretty serious programs for developing those psychic warfare units and that kind of thing. But they were apparently through the people in the Thule Society. I forget who that main woman was. Maria,
Ost, oh,
it's an O word for sure, but apparently what she was doing was, say it when you remember it, but she was channeling technology from the ethers, from some other, I believe from what she said was inner Earth civilizations. She was channeling technological information and passing it on to people who were actual scientists and engineers, and they were developing scientific innovations based on channeled information. It's like, it's a wild story, but it's a really cool story because apparently this is where the Nazi bell came from. This whole idea of having like a this idea of anti-gravitics. And I think it's really crazy that in all the decades since when we first had a car or a steam engine, propulsion has never evolved in the public domain. It's always been burn some shit and make the wheel spin, or burn some shit and blow it out the back of the engine so you go forward. Or same with the rocket ship. We've never had any advances in propulsion. And the thinking is that all of our propulsion now is oil-based, and oil is part of the control mechanism to keep this planet in the grip of a small cabal of people. But apparently at the same time this has been going on, the science is there for anti-gravity flying devices, flying machines. And apparently these Nazis had developed that stuff at the end of the Second World War. And by the time Admiral Byrd got back down there in 1946, they had their ships armed and ready to fly, and they kicked them in the nuts and sent them packing. And the implications of the story are just wild because, again, no one goes to Antarctica. There's no company down there mining coal or drilling for oil. Like, we drill for oil anywhere we can.
There's supposedly no governments doing it. It's all private contracts to corporations, to be honest with you. But hold on, I want to back up again.
Back it up.
I said the word earlier. You said it also. Cabal. That's like a volatile word. So I'm going to just read from Oxford language what a cabal is. Cabal is a noun, a secret political clique or faction. Okay, guys, don't get into it too big. That's it. I mean, that's a big deal, but that's all it is. Just a secret groups. These secret groups of everything you look at. We're on episode 29. Every episode, it's talked about the secret groups. That's the problem. When people operate in secrecy, they operate, and we're not talking they operate in secrecy for cult reasons or just to like protect like a spiritual practice that like should only be taken on by the initiates that have trained for it. We're not talking about that. We're talking about secret groups of people. The reason we would be labeled conspiracy theorists is because we talk about and make theories and talk about theories that there's more than one person talking in dark and shadowed corners about things they shouldn't be talking about, on controlling other people basically, or making deals to make things happen. So that's all we're describing this whole time. It all seems so fanciful. So like what, like really like the Arctic Germans? Yeah, Arctic Germans, dude. There weren't the Germans from Germany anymore. These are a new group. It's the Nazis reforming and going down there and taking that thing. What they did at that point in time was they were like, they had all the power. In 1948 is Operation Windmill, which has the Antarctic Germans with the cabal, meaning all these other all these other large governments in secret doing this together. They made a pact with them because they knew, they were like, oh crap. They went down there. They found that out with Admiral Byrd. They went down there and found out, oh crap, there's something going on. And it's so secretive, and we can't tell anybody about it. And they were threatened. They got blackmailed. They were like, hey, we'll show everybody our technology. If you want to keep messing with us, like, just leave us alone down here.
Yeah, because that's what will upend that oil-based world order.
Yeah. So they're like,
oil, everything runs on oil, including every military in the world. And if suddenly the world finds out that there are these other forms of propulsion, why would you still mess with oil when you've got this unlimited energy potential?
So it was like the deal with the devil. So the governments of the world made a deal with the devil, which they had already made before. So it wasn't a new one. They weren't virgins to this. And that's when Operation Windmill happens. Um, that's all in the same time. You then, you have all this technology coming from Germany, from this evil thing happening with the genocide and all these gnarly things. And they've now scrammed. And for this whole time, we've kind of been told, like, oh, it seems like a bunch of them. We
Hmm.
don't know if the big H went, but with the Charlie Chaplin mustache, we don't know if he made it, but a lot of them did, because to this day there's German speaking towns in Argentina with German architecture from, that was all brought over, and it's blonde hair, blue eyed people living in Argentina in the
And
middle of
I've met
jungles.
them too, because I've been I've worked with Argentinian college students who on their summer break would come to the US and work in the ski towns. And it's like, oh, you're from Argentina. And I'm telling you, these suckers are blonde hair and blue eyed, or they're really light skinned with brown hair. Like they are so lacking in indigenous racial characteristics. They like I just remember this one dude just looked like blonde hair, blue eyed, fit as all get up, strong, square jaw, like the whole thing. It's like, damn, dude, you look like a Nazi transplant, like the descendant of a
Well,
Nazi transplant.
that's historically known now. Like, that's already known that they took submarines and went there. We've downplayed the whole thing. We now know those submarines were twice as big as our fucking sailing, or our sailing ships. Like, they had a fleet, dude. They had us blown out of the water, but they also knew that they couldn't take on the whole world. So they made a choice. They go down to New Schwabenland. They set up there. It's a humble existence, I'm sure. I mean, yeah, they got gold and artwork and all this good stuff they brought, but you're still living under the ice and ice caves. I'm sure it's a mystical, magical, crazy thing that going on down there with all kinds of species of who knows what happening. Um,
Hey, remember too, you could be rotating your population to this military base and back to South America,
mhm.
whether it's Argentina or one of those other countries down there. It doesn't mean like everyone has to live in Antarctica, because you could just keep rotating people down there. They were bringing the best of their best. The ones who left Europe, they were the best of the best. The ones who got left behind were not the best of the best. And something to keep in mind too, for anyone who wonders about this stuff, it's like you heard of the Nuremberg trials, but if you look it up, dude, like 190 people got tried at Nuremberg, and I
12 were
believe
executed.
12 people. I mean, what was the Nazi officer corps? Tens of thousands, hundreds of
Well,
thousands?
let's just remember, we all, it's, once again, this is through FISA. We know about Operation Paperclip. This is where we distribute the Nazis all over the world, as Sam Tripoli called it. It was like there was like the free agency, or like a fantasy football draft, like who's drafting who. Like, oh
Right,
well,
nice.
yeah, we want like, it's so funny. I can just speak freely, and now right now I'm trying to think of guys' names and I can't. Like the Rocket guy, who's Rocket Man.
Werner von Braun.
Werner von, that was like probably first pick of the draft. Was like Werner von Braun. We'll take him.
He was the number one draft pick.
Like,
Yeah.
who got Mengele? Did we get Mengele
Well,
too?
well, there's really famous stories about him in South America being
Yeah,
just an
doing
evil bastard still.
crazy stuff. Yeah. So,
The
but
Wiesenthal Foundation, who used to go after these Nazis, they
Tim Kennedy
that
went
wasn't an
on a TV
academic
show.
story. Tim Kennedy?
On a TV show, they went looking for, like, did Hitler survive? It was something like that. Like,
Yeah,
and
no, he
because
did multiple episodes.
yeah, exactly. So, well, Operation Paperclip, right? So these Nazis get distributed out, which are now becoming, we're calling them AGs, Arctic Germans,
Yeah.
also. But these guys, before they become Arctic Germans, now just think of this. So the technology goes out there because the mines go out there, right? What they tell you is, or what we're seeing now is that what they did is distributed theories instead of giving the technology. So Werner von Braun would come over here with theories, right? But the whole time you got to be thinking he's a double agent and also reporting back, because he's doing the work that they want him to do. The Arctic Germans. The Arctic Germans want him to like do it on the pace of this. Don't give him any more. You know what I mean? Like that's it. You just give them what we want, and that can be distributed to the Russians and the Americans. They can all fight each other. That creates the Cold War, right? So we were allies. Now we're a Cold War enemy, in a way.
We were definitely allies during the
Yeah,
war, and
yeah. And then
quickly became
now we're
enemies.
Cold War because it's like, oh, you're the two. As China is going to start making its rise because we've already like we already kicked their teeth in at one point, but they're going to start making their rise later on. So then it becomes this Cold War. These two people, and they should call it the Cold War because the real enemy was at the bottom, down in the Antarctic, hidden under the ice, and the rest of the world knowing we can't deal with their technology. We cannot handle their fire, bro. These guys, they have it all. Like we can nuke them, but then that means everybody gets nuked.
Because apparently they had nukes as well, which
Oh,
again, a later development.
they had
But
who for the AGs?
the the the
The
Arctic
Arctic
Nazis.
the Arctic Germans had um they had the technology. They had all they had crazy weapons of power, is what starts being talked about. This is what they were out looking for, all of the ancient technologies they could get their hands on, because they became aware that there were technologies out there. And it's like, well, maybe some of it's just locked up in some museum in the basement in Egypt or something like that. And it's just been hidden there, and they just pretend it doesn't even exist. And they're like, we need to find all this. I mean, now it's Raiders of the Lost Ark as part of this, but
Yeah, totally. And hey, remember too, an anti-gravity propulsion system is a really badass weapon because these things aren't limited by the normal limitations of speed and turn capabilities and G's and things like that. You know, you set up a one-way weapon system with one of these engines on it, and you just let it rip at any kind of ship or other plane or whatever, it's gonna hit it. It's gonna be moving at a speed that you can't really counter, and it's gonna you're going to wipe out your enemy because that propulsion system itself is a weapon. It's not only just that it gets an aircraft to move around way beyond the capacity of any plane or jet. It's also in itself a weapon system. But hey, back to our Werner von Braun thing. It's like, remember when these Nazis were leaving Germany and dispersing throughout the world, this was like a vast program to insert themselves in positions of power all over the place. And they were in cahoots with our Central Intelligence Agency, and they were inserting themselves into government institutions and high-end corporate positions. So yes, Werner von Braun and his people, they ran the rocket program. They ran NASA. That's a pretty big placement for a former Nazi. But you had psychologists who were taking up roles within the CIA doing MK Ultra stuff. You had people taking roles in major U.S. corporations. You know, the Germans who ran the big companies in Germany during the war, like the guys who ran IG Farben, that giant chemical corporation, you know, these people weren't rounded up and taken to Nuremberg. They retained control of these companies that were driving the German war effort, and
yeah,
uh,
they
and
were
they diversified around
scapegoats.
the world.
They created scapegoats that they could then deal with the situation and be the people that are going to take the patsies, so to say. We'll call them in this the Oswalds.
Yeah.
They take the fall. All the brains go out into the world. They disseminate the information, and they want it the way the situation they want it disseminated in the timing they want it disseminated in, being the AGs kind of running the show. Like they won't even allow that. We'll give you technology, but we're going to give it to you, really like spoon feed you this small amount of it instead of just telling you how to do gravity. You then have this. We're back in this World War II era. This whole time we've kind of been talking mostly about, because in it was in 48 where the Project Mockingbird starts. And then that's where the Operation Windmill happens. And that's where the ceasefire happens. All right. And then basically from 48 to 54, nuclear bomb testing in 49 by USSR. Too many S's. USSR. 49 Chinese communists take control in 49. So now we have communism in the world again, stemming in two places. 50 Korean War starts, 50 to 54 McCarthy's Red Scare, 53 London debt agreement is where the bankers that had loaned all the money to the Arctic Germans, which had become 1.036 trillion, not 1,036 trillion dollars.
Well, that was the German debt, right? The country
It's
of Germany.
DM. Yeah, it says in DM, but I don't know what that stands for. So, but that's in that dollars. That like that was their or that was the debt forgiveness
Deutschmarks.
given to them. Deutschmarks. That's exactly it. So in 53, the Arctic Germans, they're like, all right, here's what we'll do. The banks are like, we'll forgive you the 1,036 trillion Deutschmarks you owe us. Which is like, I'm not saying it was equal to the dollar, but it's like that's what we're talking. We are talking nearly that. It's
Yeah,
not
that
some
was the
crazy amount.
combined debt from the First and Second World Wars, wasn't it?
Yes, it was exactly. So they forgave him of all the debt, but they're like, if you won't mess with everybody and you just stay to yourself, we'll forgive you of all this money. A
Yeah, it was another
thousand
one of those
trillion.
concessions, like wheeling and dealing to try and find a peaceful way of existing with this German breakaway civilization, because that's what they were. But they held so many high-tech cars and so many high-tech weapons. They had a lot of leverage too. Because remember, they talked in this video we're discussing in this episode about the famous UFO flyover of Washington, D.C. And that's how these Germans were
That's in
leveraging
that's in
their weight.
52, right? In 1952, that happens.
I think so.
Or is it 48?
No, I think it was in the early 50s, but what they were doing was flying their high-tech craft that outmatched anything we had, nothing even close to what they had. They fly right over our capital and say, you're going to make a deal with us
And park it. They
and park
park
it.
it in the air over the Capitol for, I believe, several hours.
It was a very famous UFO sighting. A lot of people saw it.
That's literally hardly talked about in any type of mainstream fashion for any reason, which is wild. Because at least you'd be talking about a enemy combatant taking their aircraft. If it's not an alien tech, if it is an alien or some type of alien life form on alien technology, uh, that could be one thing. It might be humanoids or humans on an alien technology. Like we don't know what we're dealing with, but it was like, oh, this is too scary. We can't let people know that happened.
Mm-hmm. Well, the idea is that the Arctic Germans had brokered with the cabal, which is what we're referring to as the people who actually run this planet. They brokered with those people to stay confidential for the rest of the world. The Arctic Germans didn't want the rest of the world knowing they'd fled to South America and to Antarctica because they knew that the rest of the world kind of hated them for a pretty good reason. So the idea was that if they could keep their escape from Germany secret, it's better and serves their purposes. And this cabal at the same time is trying to negotiate something beneficial to them along the lines of, share your technology with us, but they also didn't want to get their asses kicked again.
So they show up in 52. They
Mm-hmm.
park it over the military capital or what's about to become the military capital of the world.
Yeah.
So they park it there in DC over the White House and go, what you gonna do?
Mm-hmm.
And nothing happens physically. They're not escorted away. They are there and they leave on their own accord. These, I believe, several ships or
Yeah,
several.
there were several. There wasn't one. There were multiple.
And right after that, we just said in 1953, they're forgiven of all their loans. They're like, you know what? You don't owe us money anymore. You're cool.
Right, because that's when the World Bank or whatever institution forgave Germany its debts.
Centralized
So,
banks. It was all centralized
ostensibly,
banks.
yeah, ostensibly so that they could rebuild and join the world economy again as a peaceful partner.
Well, remember that money they were getting loaned to was also by one Prescott Bush.
Yeah, and his father-in-law, George Herbert Walker.
Yes.
Yeah, and I
So
love to say it, but Union Banking Corporation, Brown Brothers Harriman, these banks, U.S. banks, in addition to European banks, were funneling money into the Nazi Socialist Party or whatever it is back in the 30s. They were funding these people. And it wasn't until the Germans took over their own central bank, their own economy, and they arrested one of the Rothschilds. They locked up one of the Rothschilds and seized a private bank and nationalized it. And as soon as they nationalized that private private central bank that ran the German economy, as soon as they did that, boom, World War II, suckers, because you don't mess with the central banking system in this on this planet without somebody coming to wreck your country immediately afterwards.
Said by Gaddafi.
He's a great example.
Said by
Honestly, back in what year was Gaddafi?
Hussein.
2007, 2009, something like that.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Well,
Right.
it was
Yes,
Obama years, so it must have been
yeah.
after.
Yeah. Yes.
When you looked at that situation, you're like, oh, this guy was starting a new currency. He was going to decouple from the American dollar. He was going to basically give the continent of Africa an alternate means of finance that had nothing to do with the US dollar. You sounded like an honest to God crazy person by saying the reason we invaded Libya was for economics. It's because they were doing this shit with their finances and they're going to make a currency backed by gold. Back then, it sounded really nuts because no one could wrap their mind around this idea that banks actually run this world. Like that is the first tool of control in the triform system of control. It is the banking system, and that's how they control these countries. They put them in debts they could never pay back, and these banks just make a killing off of supplying a country with their own currency at interest, which is, of course, what we do, because the Federal Reserve is a private bank.
Well, at this point in time, we pay over $1 trillion interest a year on the money we've already borrowed. So we're borrowing money to continue things going, but we also just owe $1 trillion a year, which only goes up, bro. This stuff only goes up. This predatory banking where you put people in a hole and it just feeds upon itself and they can never get back to the beginning. But Gaddafi had gone completely against that. He was executed by members of the state through a coup that was obviously funded at some level or at some beginning by the United States of America and Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, Miss Rodham Clinton over here, just like, yep, we took care of that for you, Mr. Bankers. Does that make you happy? We just stopped that country from doing, bro. In that country, you would get, if you got married, you got like $50,000, and then they were like, buy a house and we will like take care of it. We will get the house with acres. They wanted people farming. They wanted people in these like creating like little small communities throughout their country. I'm sure he did evil crap too, but he might have been doing it to evil people, bro. As we know now, like one of the things that DJT said, right, bro, fake media. Like, you know, they just paint a picture and then everybody believes the picture, but they don't know what's really going on.
Yeah, and it's important to circle back to what you said. Libya had the highest standard of living in all of Africa. That was a very prosperous country. They were more educated. That country was doing pretty well. And
what they were doing was they were funding their communities and saying, if you want to go out of college somewhere else, they had no problem with it. They didn't even say you had to come home. They knew you'd want to come home because they were going to create such a good country. It wouldn't matter. You'd want to bring that knowledge back to your country because you're so proud of like what you're part of, because they were going to create a new nation because it was funded. They have mineral resources. They had all kinds of money that they can make just through the country alone, had resources to make money. And they're like, whoa, we can be a global player here. We just don't. The only way it's going to stop us is if we get caught in and put to bed with these loan sharks.
No, and like all these stories play out, it's like, you know, they tried to get the banks to take over that country. It didn't work. They tried to use the intelligence agencies to knock the guy off. It didn't work. So then they used the third leg of the triform system and they sent in the military. NATO blasted the shit out of Gaddafi's heavy military equipment, and that allowed the rebels to come in and overthrow what was left of his forces. And it was done over economics. So how did we get on this thing about economics? We were talking about UFOs over DC.
I think it was probably about money, and then we just started speaking about other people who were like speaking out against the cabal.
Yeah.
I think is where it kind of got there. I mean, let's keep it on target. We were talking about what was going on down there.
Yes.
What happened to these the Antarctic or the Arctic Germans, this is what's going on. There's a civilization down there with hundreds of thousands of people, apparently, and I'm sure it's still going on to this moment, because once again, it's the one place you just can't go. You're not allowed to go there. You were born on this planet, and somehow you have to pay to be here on this planet somehow. No matter what country you're in, you got to pay to be here somehow on the planet, and then you can't go to that place. Like all the nations are allowed to be part of something there if they want. Not all nations are part of it, but but you can't just go there as a being. You're not allowed there because it's
let me ask you
protection.
a question. Have you heard of someone just like buying a plane and doing a flyby over Antarctica?
I've heard stories, yes. They
That people
try,
have done
and then
it?
you get because you get intercepted by military aircraft.
Well, that's the thing. It's like,
Yeah, all of a sudden you have an F-16 on your wingtip, and they're like, you have entered controlled
restricted
airspace.
airspace.
You have restricted airspace. Turn back now. Like, and it'll be like, turn due east now. Turn due west, like whatever way you're flying. They'll be do this way now, or you will be fired upon. And then say you don't do what they want, right? You just keep flying. I'm going to tell you right now what's going to happen. You're going to keep flying, and then you're in their airspace. They're going to say, right, and then
Yeah.
you're gonna watch that F-16, and there's going to be a couple of them. There'll probably be two, even flanking you. And then what they're going to do is they're going to withdraw, pull away, and then you're going to turn into a ball of fire.
Right, right. And if that wasn't going to happen, I feel like the John McAfees of the world would have gotten a plane and done a couple laps around Antarctica just to check it out. But I've never heard of someone actually doing that. Like
People have done it, right? We don't hear about it. The last one we have a true story about is Admiral Byrd. There's other stories, but people get misdirected. They get pushed off course. They don't, you can't fly into an F-16. If you're in like some piece of crap plane, if you bump an F-16, I'm guessing the piece of shit plane goes down.
oh yeah, there's nothing you're going to do against that kind of aircraft.
You
They're
know,
gonna they're gonna outmaneuver you. They're gonna blow you out of the sky.
they have a machine gun they could put on one wing and just make you go down if they want. Like it doesn't end, but no, it's restricted airspace. You cannot enter it without a permit, and everything permitted is like. The scariest part is they're starting to tell us this right now. On the Sean Ryan show, he had those whistleblowers on. One of them was doing whistleblowing for Antarctica.
Yeah, a U.S. Antarctic base that was run by one of those military companies.
Raytheon, I believe.
Yes, yes, yes.
And don't hang us up on that. It's on the Sean Ryan show. You can go check it out. We've already talked about this on the previous episode, but there are whistleblowers coming out against all this right now, which scares me because whistleblowers like Assange, whistleblowers like Snowden are like
In big trouble.
castrated and thrown out of the tribe. They're like,
Yep.
no, like you're out. Like, well, they really would like to have a piece of them. They both like escape, but then one's caught, the other one's caught by Russia. But then there's other whistleblowers can go and just whistleblow. Like, bro, we've been doing this a while. We've been doing this too long. When they like let them go in front of Congress, it makes me feel like they're doing an information release, which could be a misinformation release or
Like a limited
disinformation
hangout.
release. Yeah, they're just like, oh, we're telling you things now. We're going down on there because it's all private corporations, so we can't FISA what the U.S. government's doing in Antarctica because they've hired private corporations to do it. This is how they deal with all this technology. Is they like, oh, we have to get this out of the government because they eventually realize you guys can look at this stuff, even though they still cover things up, even though things are completely covered up still.
Yeah, and bro, we were doing our own experiments and propulsion and anti-gravity flying machines and stuff like that. And we know where we got the information from. But when you see the Tic Tac spaceship off the coast of Mexico and California, and the F-16 has its FLIR radar locked on the thing, and the military gives us the video from those weapon systems that show you the Tic Tac spacecraft, that's not an extraterrestrial. That's our hardware. And we don't have it out in the public because it would upturn the world economy that's based on oil. But I think we put it out there as a threat to these other countries. It's like, hey, just so you know, this is the tech we're rolling with. While you guys are still doing fifth generation fighters, we've got Tic Tac spacecrafts that'll go from sea level to 40,000 feet in the blink of an eye.
I'm sure us and Russia both, like, because we've gotten to work with craft that were probably intentionally fallen to see that we could use to see if we could do like reverse engineering on with the technology. We were kind of being like given some knowledge on certain things, but wouldn't be given at all. We were given this little like wet blanket of things. We weren't given something nice and fluffy that we could like really build with. It was that's all going back once again to that windmill part. That's like where they stay in control. We're going to send our technology out into the world. But we're not going to send the technology. We're going to send information out, see what they can all do with it, see what they can be like kind of organically build with a nudge and rumors or like hints. See what can be created. And then you do see the two nations split in where they do better, like from Russia and America. The Russians like do incredible with rocket technology compared to us. Like our rocket technology was nowhere near them.
Well, they got a really well
also there's
hypersonic missile program.
Yeah. Also their submarine technology is like phenomenal, apparently, was compared to ours. And we do have phenomenal submarine technology. It's all these things are just literally just death crafts, that can go out into the water of space. But what you eventually start dealing with is like plasma technologies is where we're at. Like to change it up. I know I'm all over, but you were talking about free technology. Then the big move is now that we're starting to find out about plasma technology. Randall Carson is talking about this. He's kind of hinted about it, but it's all coming out now. There's this plasma technology where that really grasps the energy.
Yeah. Let's keep on this for a second, because Tesla was making free energy devices long time ago, and it all gets suppressed. All these alternate energy sources, we've talked about Stanley Meyer and his car that runs on water. We're talking about what the Germans were doing with these anti-gravitic flying machines and stuff like that, the Nazi Bell. All this stuff has been around for decades, and it's been suppressed because the order of the world is to run on oil. And it's a system in place that is being held on to with all kinds of greed. But I really think that there's this moment that's going to happen before long where these other machines like the Tic Tac actually go public, because it's there. And right now, the United States isn't really poised to do very well in any kind of world conflict. We used to be a little tougher than we are now. And I think it's because so much of our funding and resources have been directed to these other programs. Back in the 40s, when the jet engine made its real debut, all the countries of the world had these massive armadas of prop engine planes. And they all became obsolete overnight because the jets that came out in the 40s and 50s, they would just run circles around these things and they'd smoke them.
Which was still a technology that wasn't that dissimilar to what was happening. But then they did jet turbines.
Yeah.
So instead of an aircraft would be the spinning propeller, and then you spin the propeller, and then the blade angle would then move the craft through space and time because of it moving so fast it would pull itself through the air, right? But jet turbines were a different technology where they kind of took that, like they took a part of the technology of like wind blades moving through the air at a certain angle, creating a technology, and then they moved it up they created jet propulsion.
Yeah, but it still burns gas, right?
Yeah. No, 100%.
It's still run on gas.
Well, I'm trying to like say, even though there was like this next level thing, it was still based on this other technology of like an angled blade moving in a certain area, and then we'll burn it at a different gas rate and all these other things to make it a jet turbine. Yes.
Right. They just refined what they already had.
That's it. It wasn't some new type of technology. Real. I mean, It was a revision of other technology that was right there. It's not anti-propulsion. This other technology we're talking about goes between time and space. It moves itself along through the grips of space just by the anti-gravitic field you're in, somehow globulating and pulling itself. Like, it's the most amazing ideas when you really think about the other one. Like, one's propulsion of like pushing, the other one's just like moves.
It's a huge leap in science. It's a huge leap, and it is there. It is suppressed, and I bet you, the powers that be, or cabal that runs this planet, they don't want to drop this on the world, and unless I guess they have to. But I'm pretty sure they want to keep this thing a secret because they like the system as it is, with this oil-based world economy. But if it does, if these craft need to be used on a mass scale to blast whatever enemy of the moment is out there, it's got to make the armies of the world obsolete overnight too, because all your jet engines, they can't compete with this technology.
Yeah, well, that's why it's remained hidden. That was the deal they made with Operation Windmill, was like, hey, we can't tell anybody about this. And then that's been the battle ever since. It's slowly been disseminated out. Some of the countries have now like reverse engineered technology. They've created the technology. They're starting to catch up to times, but it's still so remedial compared to what was originally. It seems like there's some original technology that's well beyond, and it's from somebody else. I mean, we can only get so far on this podcast. Okay.
Yeah.
So we've been talking a lot about technology right now, but they also did it with psychology, with the MK Ultra programming. These are all what that Third Reich was doing. That's what they were crushing at, was like getting into people's heads, reprogramming of people through usually trauma and terror. But MK Ultra, which was Operation Artichoke previously,
trauma-based mind control.
Yeah. So you're just watching these intelligence agencies we have in this country at this point in time, when this is all happening in the late 40s, 50s. This now propels the country to where we've been talking about for the last 8 episodes before this. This is what this is all down to. This isn't all by accident. This has all been ushered in. It's not like this isn't not organic thing that's happened, by accident. Like, nature just happens. It's like, no, this has been happening for 70 years.
Yeah,
we've been a product of this like dire evil that everybody speaks of and cannot say the name. Please do not say that. It's like the other N word, basically. And we're now finding out we've literally still been part of their information technology and mind control. Like, if you look at our intelligence agencies for the CIA, basically OSS into the CIA.
Yeah, breakaway Nazis infiltrated the major institutions of this country, the major corporations around the world, major institutions of other countries, and that's a very dark influence to have on the world. And again, like